Okay, welcome everyone. So it is great to have you all here at our first webinar, Understanding Online Risks and Opportunities for Children and Young People and Sharing Resources and Practical Help. My name is Sangeet Bhullar. I come from an organization called Wise Kids, which really focuses on education for the digital age with an emphasis on young people's own experiences and voices. So we work with parents, professionals, and young people themselves to develop critical thinking, to develop digital literacy, and now in the age of AI, to develop AI literacy as well. So to keep me on the straight and narrow, I am going to come to share my slides with you and take you through a bit of an overview of our session today. I'm delighted we have some key speakers with us, and I will introduce you to them shortly. So let me share my screen. Okay, so the format for our sessions are, I will begin by giving you a little bit of an overview, especially in terms of what we mean by promoting digital smarts, which is a very American phrase, but it refers to that critical thinking that we need young people to have for the digital world. I'm also going to be handing over then to Dr. Mariya Stolova from the London School of Economics, who will present the work that they're doing to understand and promote children's well-being, engagement, and resilience. And then I will pass you to Katie Freeman from Internet Matters, who produce really excellent research and resources. And then finally to Martha Dooley, who is going to talk about something incredibly important. How do we help young people keep safe from online gambling? So I'm going to get going with my sort of overview. So when we think about the digital world, it is everywhere. It is ubiquitous. It is shaping how we think, how we live. It is shaping the experiences we can have. And we need to prepare children and young people for that world in an age-appropriate way. Because if we think about the internet, many of us will have sites, apps, things that we use, and we tend to think of the internet in terms of those lenses, in terms of those experiences. So the internet can feel very abstract. And here I want to give you an example of a real world scenario where a child, if you like, is having the experience of going to the city for the very first time with their parents. Now, when a child goes to the city, the parent goes with them for the first time. Maybe they take a bus, they drive in, they park, they go to shops that are good. But inevitably, parents also teach children what to avoid, how to look out for stranger danger, how to look out for hazards in that city. And a city is visible, so it's easy to assess risk. Yet when a child is on a device, they cannot see the full range of people, content, services that they can access. So one of my first points here is really that we need to think about the environment of the internet itself when we're developing critical thinking, digital literacy, AI literacy. And we need to start with, what do children understand about this world? So if a child is 12, 13, what do they understand about the internet? Is it just YouTube? Is it just influencers? Is it just Instagram? And we need to think about all the things that children can encounter to get them to begin to understand this world, because the digital world is a real world. There are real consequences to actions in this world. So it's really important that we understand this world ourselves and that children understand it too. And so one of the first things we talk about when we talk about the internet in our work in Wise Kids is helping children understand that this internet is really a global connection of computer networks worldwide, a bit like a spider's web, but where every country in the world, more or less, has internet access. And that means that we are connected to people, cultures, political systems, beliefs that might be very different to our own, and yet many that are very similar. People browse the internet in Spanish, in Chinese, in Russian, and in English. So no two people might see the same internet. The other reason for highlighting this is because it's a complicated world. And as a parent, we prepare children for life, for socializing, for interacting with friends and family. Now, in the same way, the digital world is just another space that we have to think of to prepare children around. So the interactions they're going to have, the things they're going to see, the pressures that might be enacted through those digital platforms. So we want to be proactive about learning about this digital world because it also provides immense benefit. And so that's one of the key points I want to make. This literacy is about understanding the internet, understanding the types of things you can see and hear and the people you can encounter, but also the commercial environment, because we know the internet was not designed for children. And I think people, particularly Mariya's team, the Digital Futures team, are doing huge work to ensure that children's rights and interests are central in all the discussions around safety online. So one of the key concepts we use for children and young people is that you can think of the internet a bit like a global city. And just like a real city, you have people, content, services in here. But of course, the internet doesn't totally map to a real city in that you have international audiences, you can have information that can get shared and become public in a way that it wouldn't in a physical city. So the sorts of questions that then get asked could be things around who can see what I'm sharing? How do I manage my privacy? Where can I get help if someone upsets me online? Are there laws online? How much time should I be online? What do I do if someone makes a request and I don't quite know how to deal with it? Because the reality is the internet is bringing an adult world into our homes. And with that, a lot of benefit, but with that, challenges too. So we want to be having ongoing conversations with our children about these things so that we're not just talking about YouTube or just talking about Snapchat or TikTok, but the wider aspect of the internet. Because when you begin to understand how technology works and how information comes to us and how businesses like social media companies perhaps have algorithms that feed us content and keep us sometimes in a filter bubble or echo chamber, we need to make sure that our children understand some of these things. So there's a lot to learn with the internet. And I'm very conscious that this short presentation doesn't give me the opportunity to do that in great detail. But I am going to point you to a workshop, going to be doing a half-day workshop that I hope that you might sign up for. So this digital world is pervasive, it's everywhere, and we know it provides a whole range of risks. Many of you as parents, carers, professionals will know these risks, but it also presents us with lots of positives. We know, particularly during COVID, how important all of this was. If we didn't have connection to friends and family, to knowledge, information, to shopping online services, life would have been very difficult. And yet we also take for granted that everyone is digitally connected, which they're not. And part of my interest is digital inclusion, and there is still some way to go with ensuring that everybody has access to the internet. We also know it's a world where there are laws, and we want our young people to understand the law so that they don't cross over and actually come to harm or break the law. We are also seeing huge changes in terms of new AI technologies that are becoming available to the public. At the end of around November 2022, I believe, OpenAI released ChatGPT, which is the first search agent, if you like, that all of us as the public could use. Now, if those of you here as parents and carers haven't tried ChatGPT, I recommend you do, because these are technologies that are currently changing what we can do online. For example, using these generative AI technologies, you can design a course, you can write essays, you can do a whole bunch of things using services like ChatGPT or Perplexity. And it's changing a lot of what is going to be needed in the workplace in terms of skills. And so artificial intelligence technologies are here to stay. And today, a lot of you might think, have I used AI? Well, chances are all of us have used AI because they're in our smartphones, they're in search engines. Every time you're on social media and you get recommended certain feeds, that's all AI controlled. AI is basically just software that has been trained on data to be able to perform tasks that mimic human intelligence. But the new development since 2022 is generative AI, which means now the artificial intelligence software can answer questions like a person, can produce content, can design courses. So if you've not heard of this, these are some of the services to take note of, things like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Midjourney, and so on. But we also know AI produces a lot of challenges. Together with the huge positives, it can be used to produce what we call deepfake videos. It can be used to create misleading content, and you can have a whole range of misuses around things like voice cloning. And so today, in terms of scams, the number of scams that are prevalent that use AI is also increasing. And of course, it can be used in generating illegal content, harmful content. So these are things that we need to be aware of, and we need to be having conversations with our children about these things. So what can we do? I think it's really important to recognize that although we're talking about technology, it is about parenting, because what protects children is if they feel safe to come and talk to you about the things that they are interested in online, but the things that bother them online as well. So we've got to be proactive and be the parent as well, because I think sometimes parents think that, oh, perhaps, my child is only doing homework online, and there can be an excessive amount of time online. Like many of my colleagues here, I'm not in favor of a blunt instrument of just using screen time as a measure of when you should get online or offline, because so much depends on the age of the child, their cognitive ability, but also, whether they've got schoolwork and projects to do, and also your involvement. But it's really important that children have balanced lives, that they're going out and getting exercise, that they're actually meeting friends face to face, because we are preparing them for life, not just the digital world. So having boundaries and having rules, particularly with very young children, using software filters to protect yourselves, in terms of what's allowed to be accessed at home, these are key. But just as important, it is so key that we talk to children about healthy relationships, about manipulation and blackmail, about how no one has the right to ask them for inappropriate or illegal content, child nudes, for example. Because unfortunately, our children today are getting exposed to all these sorts of requests. But sometimes children tell me they don't tell their parents because they're afraid the parent's going to take away their device, or perhaps they're afraid of parents maybe scolding them, and they're afraid of losing privileges. So I think it's really key that we are not afraid to parent, but understand that this is not just about the technology, but that children need life skills for that digital space that they're interacting in, whether that is in a game, whether that is on Roblox, or whether that's on Minecraft, or whether they're on Snapchat. And I think the other key thing is there is so much that is good online that we need to make sure we know some of the best sites. If you've not looked at AI at all, one very simple example is Khan Amigo. So you join the two words. Now, this is an AI personal tutor produced by the Khan Academy, and it allows a child to really get at the point of need help, to help them with maths, with science, with whatever subject they're stuck with. And this is an example of where AI can be used positively. And finally, I think the other point I want to make is children learn not just by what we say, but how we act. And so if we ourselves have good habits at home, putting away the screen at meal times, for example, and talking to our children and being present with them, I think that's also really key. So I want to highlight to you that I've produced for you a Padlet page with a huge range of resources that you will get at the end of this webinar and the completion of feedback forms, but I will come back to this at the end of this webinar. So I am going to stop sharing for a moment now and come back to all of you. And I hope that made sense. I know it was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I look forward to taking any of your questions at the end of this time. And I want to hand over now to my colleague, Mariya Stolova. So Mariya is a postdoc researcher at the London School of Economics. She's also the manager of the Digital Futures for Children Centre there. And her work focuses on the intersection of children's rights, digital technology use, well-being and family support, intimate life, citizenship and social inequality. So I'm really delighted to have her here, and I'm going to hand over to you, Mariya.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Sangeet, and also for a very helpful overview of some of the things that we are dealing with online. I hope you can see my screen now, and I'm going to start my timer. So I think it's really important to think about the evidence of what we have, because we currently have rising concern about children's screen time, about children's presence on social media. We have quite mixed messages from governments, some of them banning children, like Australia, to be on social media altogether, and others advising, like the UK government, advising schools not to allow children to use mobile devices. So my job at LSE and the Children's for Digital Future Centre is to really look at the evidence and see whether there's any reason to be concerned about mental health when we think about these things. So the first thing I want to mention is a recent report from my colleagues from EU Kids Online. It's a European network which has been studying children's internet use for the past 25 years. They've recently reviewed the evidence on children's experiences of the digital world and how it affects their mental health. And they have come to the conclusions that it's a very complex relationship, and there's no one case that works for everyone. So we really need to unpack things that you already mentioned, Sangeet, a bit earlier, about children's abilities to cope, about children's skills, about what they actually do online. So this also is similar to some of the things that me and my colleagues have been trying to work on. So this is the research team, that one of the projects that I'm currently working on, which is called the Aura. And for this project, we are trying to unpack what digital engagement means, because looking at screen time and looking at social media more generally is not really helpful to understand what is affecting children, because there's positive and negative effects. So we want to see actually what is the reciprocal relationship between their digital activities and things like depression, anxiety, and well-being. Is there a cause for concern? And we have a large community sample of over 500 UK adolescents. They're aged between 13 and 15, and we're doing a 1-year longitudinal study. We've currently done the baseline and 6-month data collection, and we're about to start the 1-year data collection, which will really help us unpack this relationship. So this is a multi-method study. We've been talking to year 9 students as well, and we've picked this kind of age group because this is a really important transition for young people in their adolescence, when they're trying things, where they're kind of establishing their identity. So we really see a decline in mental health in relation to that period of their life. We also did a preliminary study with a sample of older adolescents, of nearly 400 young people aged 16 to 25, and I'll show you some of the analysis for this. So this was the first step. So the preliminary sample helped us establish what we mean by digital engagement. So we had a long list of digital activities because, as I said, we wanted to unpack what engagement means. And based on some analysis that we did on the older sample, we were able to identify 5 different types of online activities. Some of them are more positive, some of them are more negative. As you can see here, there's engagement with risky content, which is one group. And here we have watching dark content like self-harm or violent images, or watching people being mean to each other, or sexual content. So that's one group of activities that young people might be doing online. We also have leisure activities, which are more positive. So we have something like having fun online with family or friends, or playing a game with other people, or doing something like a hobby. We also have social engagement type of activities, which is watching something fun online, or chatting with people, or liking or sharing their content. Another important group of activities is the so-called by us social comparison activities. So this is why young people compare themselves with how others look, or how popular they are, or how thin they are online, and that's very important part, and you'll see a bit later on why. And then we have finally the last group is risky interactions, which covers things like being treated in a hurtful or nasty way, or meeting strangers, or being left out of online activities. So following the analysis of the data from the younger sample that we studied, we are actually seeing that digital activities are mostly positive from what they are reporting, and the riskier types of activities are much less frequent. So the things that young people do online tend to be the social interactions when they're chatting to people, whether they're friends or family, where they're doing things like hobbies, creative activities, playing games. These things occurred most of the days of the week, and they have actually positive effect on young people, as I'll show you in a little bit later. But there are some activities that could potentially pose risks for mental health. So they are much less frequent, but the ones that are more prominent from them are the engagement in social comparisons, which I mentioned being very important, and then viewing things like risky content, violent material, and things like that. So what we also wanted to do in this project, which we often don't see in the research, and I think it's a very important step to also make and recognize, is that it's also important to look at the emotions that these activities provoke in young people. And I'll show you the data that it's actually very important. Because positive emotions and negative emotions can have very different effect on young people. So we actually found, which was very good, that positive emotions to being online are much more common. However, there was some experience of negative things as well. So amongst the positive emotions that young people mention is feeling valued, feeling loved, feeling hopeful because of online engagement. However, some of the negative ones, as I said, even though less frequent, they were still there. And we have things like feeling worried or stressed or lonely or insecure, which were reported only occasionally, but still there. So another important finding from the early analysis of this data is that being online is here in seen by the young people is having more positive effect on their mental health rather than negative. So 3 in 4 children actually reported that being online has had at least slightly positive effect on their mental health, and nearly half did not see any negative effects, which I think is actually quite good. However, we should not underestimate that some young people are sharing some of their concerns. For example, slightly less than half said that they were somewhat worried about how being online has affected them. So that's 48%, even though 52 were not worried at all. And we also asked them about some of the impacts from digital engagement on their everyday life. And the most common negative impact was having less sleep, which was experienced by 71% of the young people at least once during the past 2 weeks. And other negative effects were having school difficulties as a result of having family conflict. So I've put some quotes here. I'm not going to read them out loud, all of them. You can read them while I'm speaking, but this is to illustrate. We went to speak to year 9 students and asked them to give us a positive example of things that made them feel good, and a negative example. And these quotes are from the positive examples. So the first one is from a girl in year 9, and she's saying how a friend shared a nice picture. And I really like that she said it made me feel happy and loved. There's something quite nice about how that simple act from her friend made her feel in a positive way. The other quote from the girl is how she was struggling with her hair, and so a video with a TikTok tutorial which actually helped her with the hair quite practically, but also helped her feel included because other people actually had the same type of hair and had the same type of problem. So she actually was happy for being included in that way. The positive example from the boy down there is another kind of tutorial video when he's talking about his PlayStation overheating and finding a tutorial. It actually helped him clean the PlayStation step by step. And he said that it made me feel relieved because I knew the PlayStation would work even better. And the second example from the boy is how he was playing a game in an online stream tournament, and he actually won, and he was congratulated by the streamer who was live streaming the game, and he celebrated, and actually he went and told his parents, was really proud of this moment. I think it's important to remember the positive and to hear them in children's own kind of words. But unfortunately, as I said, not all can be positive. And here are some of the negative examples. The first one, somebody being called names because of their accent. The second example from the girl is how she experienced racism from somebody on a game that she, after that, made her feel uneasy. So she reported that. The other example is from a game where a boy felt that he was contributing quite a lot to it, but then his squad let him down and allowed him to get killed and made him feel irritated and annoyed. And another example is from a girl who had an anonymous account created from her and kind of mocking her about her facial features, which she was upset about and got over eventually. So for us, it's really important, as you can see, there's positives and negatives, and it's really important to know what actually creates the negative effect. I know this looks like a complicated slide, but we need to focus only on a few things here, and I'm going to explain it. So it's, I promise you, it's going to be easy. So what we did in the analysis, it's look at the digital activities that young people did, and this is on the slightly older sample that I mentioned earlier, and to see how that affects their symptoms of depression. So you can see the red arrows on the left going into depression. That means that these things actually increase depression. And we have activities like risky content, we have the social comparison, and we have the risky interactions online, which actually have negative effect on depression. On the positive side, leisure activities like having fun online actually decreased depression. So I think this difference is important, because taking a device away from example is taking this ability for children to engage in the things that actually help them. So on the right-hand side, we did the same analysis, but we added how young people feel from the digital engagement. And you can see here that most of the online activities stop being important. And what it means that it matters how children feel after they do these online activities, whether they've seen online risky content. It doesn't matter if they did not feel in a negative way. So the things that we found after we've accounted for the feelings they experience, social comparisons was still a negative impact on depression. So this is an important factor that needs to be considered when we think about children's mental health. And the other things were purely the feelings that children experience. So negative self-reaction and negative stress reaction are two types of negative feelings. One is a more general feeling of sadness, for example, and the other one is feeling towards oneself. I feel stupid, for example. These were the two different types of negative feelings which we saw affected depression. And then the positive reactions, so feeling good about oneself, feeling happy, actually decreased depression. Interestingly, we looked at mental health, and the picture there is quite different. So the leisure activities improved mental health, and so did social engagement. Social comparison had a negative effect, and screen time for the first time became relevant in this analysis when it decreased mental well-being. So when we filtered the feelings and the reactions that the engagement provoked, screen time was still relevant, but the other factors were not. while negative feelings about oneself were decreasing mental well-being, while positive feelings were overall increasing well-being. So what does that mean? To several important findings. So for well-being and depression are independent. So to increase one does not necessarily mean that the other one will automatically improve. So we need a very comprehensive approach. The most frequent activities are the social interactions online, which are positively, even though weakly, associated with well-being. Making social comparisons was frequent, but also linked to increased depression and reduced well-being. And it's not only what young people do online, but how that activity makes them feel that matters, because negative feeling about the self and being stressed online have negative effects on both mental health and well-being, while positive feelings, which were also frequent, had reduced depression and better well-being. So what we're going to do, because in this model, we know that these things coexist, but we don't know which one comes first. So in the longitudinal study, once we have the 1-year data, we're going to try to explain which comes first. Is it the digital engagement that comes first, or is it the poor mental health that actually drives the digital engagement? At this point, we can't say. And just to end on what are the kind of things that parents can do, I think we need to talk to young people about their online experiences. And it was already mentioned that young people don't always share. So when we talk to them, it's important to ask them how being online made them feel and the kind of things that they're doing, rather than how long did they spend online. We need to be able to encourage their positive activities, because they're creative things that they can do that actually can support them, can build their skills, and can build their resilience. We need to discuss the social comparison. As I've been saying throughout this presentation, it has a very significant negative effect, and we need to keep reminding people that the online world and the representation of people is not how things are in real life. They know that, but I think we need to keep reassuring and repeating them to them. To them. We need to support them when facing harmful content. Risks are unavoidable, and actually it's positive for them to be able to build resilience by being exposed to small amounts, regulated or kind of not extreme risks. It actually helps them build skills, helps them build resilience. So we need to support children with the smaller risks and prevent them from facing the bigger and more harmful things. And having a balanced digital habit is really the awareness that it was already earlier mentioned, kind of the critical thinking about how is this affecting me? What is the effect? Do I need to remove myself from this situation, or do I need to engage in something more positively? So the presentation is going to be shared. So there I've put information about the 2 samples, which I'm not going to cover, and just wanted to say thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer questions later on.
Thank you so much, Mariya, for that very stimulating presentation. And, I think, as you say, it is a complicated space, but there is plenty that parents can do. And I think it's a lot of, I was just chuckling that our end slides looked very similar. So thank you very much. We'll take questions at the end. So Katie, I am delighted to welcome you next. So Katie Freeman-Tayler is Head of Research and Policy at Internet Matters. And Internet Matters produce an annual research report, Children's Wellbeing in the Digital World. And I think Katie is going to share findings from that, as well as the resources that Internet Matters produce. And they are probably one of the UK's leading providers of resources. And I don't say that lightly, having been in this space for many, many years. So Katie, welcome. The floor is yours.
So for those of you not familiar with Internet Matters, we are a not-for-profit dedicated to children's online safety. We provide resources and guidance for parents and professionals to help keep children safe online, but we also conduct research to understand what children are doing online, what kind of challenges parents are facing, and we use these to inform our resources and guidance. But we also use them to kind of champion parents' voices with policymakers, whether that's regulators, parliamentarians, or government departments. We do a lot of research across a wide range of areas, and today I'm going to be talking to you about our Children's Wellbeing in a Digital World Index. But we conduct kind of regular research with parents and children and young people, sort of understanding what concerns parents have, what challenges children are facing online. We do deep dive research into a range of topics. So we've done research on AI in education. We've done research into neurodivergent children's experiences of online gaming. We've done research looking at media literacy education and what can be done to support schools to teach media literacy more effective. So do go and check out our website if you are interested in any of this research. But today I'm going to be talking about what we call our annual Digital Wellbeing Index. This is a research project that we do with 1,000 children and their parents. We've been doing it for 4 years now. We're just in the process of doing our fieldwork and data collection for our next report. But today I'm going to be sharing findings from our 2024 report. Our methodology is based on some work we did with the University of Leicester, which sort of tries to paint a holistic perspective of children's online lives, very similar to what we were just talking about in terms of there's lots of positives that children and young people get from being online, but also there can be some challenges. So our Digital Wellbeing Index does that sort of based on developmental wellbeing, emotional wellbeing, physical wellbeing, and social wellbeing. I'm not going to share all of the findings and some of the trends and things, but just a couple of key ones that came through last year that I thought might be of interest, and to give you a bit of a flavour. I think sometimes a lot of the media coverage of children's online lives can be quite negative focused, but we know that, you know, children wouldn't be online if it wasn't for the kind of joy and positivity that it can really bring to children and young people. And that's what we see coming through in this piece of research, is all of the positive elements alongside some of those challenges that children face. So, for instance, we found last year that children are feeling more confident, independent, connected, and inspired online. You know, children use technology as a source of inspiration. They can use it for creativity, you know, making dances on TikTok. It provides learning beyond the classroom, and it's also really important for discovering new hobbies or areas of interest. We often find, particularly in years of big sporting events like last year with the Olympics, that often online can be a source of inspiration about new sports or trying a new physical activity. So lots of positives that can come. Unfortunately, children do experience harm online, and at some point children will have some sort of negative interaction that will have an impact on their emotional resilience or you know, well-being as well. And we have seen some areas for concern. So there has been sort of increased feelings of loneliness at times. We're seeing increased experiences of contact from stranger, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a moment. And then also some of the physical health impacts that parents are observing, such as impact on sleep, particularly as children get older as well. We see sort of an increase on that element. But families are feeling a bit more connected. Parents are feeling a bit more engaged in children's online lives, which is great. We saw a really strong finding in the piece of research that parents were having more conversations with their children about online safety, and that's really important. We know that that parents are children's number one source of information about online safety, and they're who children turn to when something goes wrong online. So seeing a kind of rise in those open conversations and parents sort of looking at what children are doing on apps, you know, coming and sitting with them and learning how to play games that they're on. Those are all really positive ways that you can engage with children's online lives. And we're seeing that is increasing and parents becoming more confident to do that as well. But naturally, you know, parents do have worries and concerns. You know, every parent has that. It can sometimes feel quite overwhelming, particularly the pace of technological change. So parents are worried about things like harmful interactions and also family technology, particularly screen time, sort of invading on family time. And there were some concerns around mirroring as well, in terms of, you know, everyone sitting at home on different devices in the house, and how that's sort of become quite a natural way of being in the home. So those were some of the kind of top lines that were coming through in our research. Obviously, every family is different. There isn't sort of a one-size-fits-all approach to online safety or one-size-fits-all experience of life online. And we do see some sort of themes come through in our research. So in all research we do, we find that girls tend to experience different types of harm online than boys. So, for example, girls are much more likely to be contacted by strangers, and you can see from the statistic here, 48% of girls aged 15 to 16 had reported a contact with a stranger, which was a significant increase from the previous year. So an issue that is very kind of prevalent and relevant. We also find that children with special educational needs or physical or learning disability are more likely to experience a lot of the positives online, but they're also more likely to experience a lot of the negatives. And we can see here quite a gap between those children and children without those vulnerabilities. And this is all just to say, that means that there's different kind of approaches or conversations that you might want to have as a parent, just with those sorts of differentiations in mind as well. As part of our research, we also did a bit of a deep dive, particularly into girls' experiences online. We saw, based on that statistic I showed on the last slide around increased contact from strangers, we were seeing sort of particular differences for girls in our research last year. So we did some deep dive work with teenage girls and their parents, asking them about their experiences online. And again, we found that, girls enjoy being online. That brings them a lot of joy. They like making content and sharing that. They like the social element of interacting with friends. But like many children and young people, this is constrained by the fact that girls experience harm online, such as harassment or exposure to what we might term harmful content, so something like eating disorder content, which can be difficult and have an emotional toll. And unfortunately, girls sort of see this as just part and parcel of being online and become quite sort of desensitized to that in some ways, or at least that's what we were seeing come through in this research. And not only was it being somewhat normalized for girls, but also parents as well, with one parent sort of talking about how it was so standard, it's not noteworthy receiving unwanted messages. So I think, when you hear about these stories all the time, sometimes it does just sort of sit there in your mind and you're not surprised. But I don't think, that means we shouldn't be thinking about this more as well. And of course, this, contact will have an emotional or potentially negative experiences, can have an impact on children and young people as well. And just a couple of quotes from girls on the screen. I think that first one's particularly powerful, and also sort of the role, and the second one, that girls sort of see it as their responsibility to keep themselves safe online. And I think that is perhaps a sad space to be, where there is maybe regulators or parents' roles are underestimated there. That was all the research. I've sort of fired through that, but I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about Internet Matters resources, as I think this is perhaps the most sort of helpful element of our work. So as I said at the beginning, we create resources and guidance for parents and professionals. Everything is freely available on our website, internetmatters.org. We have hundreds of free resources and guides. And I'm just going to take you through some of our popular ones today. I'm going to highlight the ones for parents, but if you do work in the teaching profession, or you have experience with professionals, maybe care homes, we also have resources for them on our website as well. I'm just not going to be showcasing those ones today. So the first sort of section of resources I wanted to share was, we have an area of our website where you can go and look at all of our resources by issues, or some of our resources by issues. So if you're having a challenge around self-harm, or maybe pornography, and you want to have a conversation around that, or you want to sort of get up to speed on something that's happening in that space, if you go into this area and click into these subject areas, you can find articles, you can find statistics, you can find conversation starters, you can find activities. So this can be a really good starting point if there's a particular issue or challenge or conversation that you would like to focus on. We also have step-by-step parental guides. So if you want help setting up parental controls, whether that's at the router level, device level, or platform level, we have guides for everything you could need. Some of them are video guides, some of them are downloadable PDF guides, but there's an entire section around parental guides, and also looks at kind of children by different ages as well, and what protections you might want to put in place based on your family circumstance and child. So that's another thing that we have up on the website. We have also lots of interactive content as well. So we have activities that you can do with your child. So for instance, find the fake quiz, that's sort of something that you can do online. We have some quizzes for Roblox, if you know about setting up parental control, setting up safe kind of gaming features and things like that. As I said, we've got those conversation starters for almost any topic. And then we also have sort of worksheets or activities that you can do with your children as well to engage them with what they're doing online. And if all of that sounds really overwhelming and you're not sure where to begin, we also have something called My Family's Digital Toolkit. And this, you just put in a few details about your family, maybe the ages of your children and what activities they're doing, what platforms they're on, and you'll get a list of what you might want to consider, some reading, some potential parental controls that you might want to consider, some conversations that you might want to think about having with your child. And that's just be a really helpful starting point if you are feeling overwhelmed and not quite sure where to begin. And then the last thing I will say is just that if you are interested in anything that we do, please do sign up to our newsletter. We all have newsletters, it seems, but you get resources, guidance as they come out, particularly as sort of topical issues pop up. All of our research and new articles that we do with experts in the field, they come out through our newsletters as well. So please either sign up, use this QR code, or head to our website.
Thank you very much, Katie. That was an excellent overview and, really insightful, and particularly a big thank you for sharing the resources, which I think many parents will find very useful. And now we come to our final presentation, and we've got Martha Dooley, who is the Education and Training Lead at GamCare. Lovely to have you here, Martha. And I think Martha's going to talk about the issue of online gambling for young people and how we can keep young people safe. So over to you, Martha.
Thank you. So my name's Martha, and I'm here today from GamCare, which is a charity organisation aimed at raising awareness of gambling-related harms. So my day-to-day is going and delivering workshops to the community around raising awareness of these gambling-related harms. And then in addition to these workshops, we also offer therapeutic support for those people who are struggling either with their own gambling harms or the gambling harm of another person. All of our signposting tools, our support avenues, I will come to later on in the presentation. So what we will be discussing today, we only have 15 minutes, so it will be a mini bite, but we are going to be touching on what is gambling, what are the gambling-like mechanisms within gaming, what are some of the signs to look out for that some of these gambling-like mechanisms within games might be becoming problematic, and then where can you go for advice and support. We will be touching on a lot of information in quite a short period of time, so if there's anything that you forget, then you can just type in these two words, big deal, into Google at the end of today, and it will come up with everything we've spoken about, plus all of our support avenues. So those two words, big deal, if you do remember anything from today. Okay, so what is gambling? Our definition of gambling is to stake or risk money or anything of value on the outcome of something involving chance. So here it's important to remember that in order to gamble, you don't always need to use money. There are some instances where people don't have access to money in order to gamble. For example, prisons and young people who don't have a steady income, they don't have access to money, so they might be using things that are of value to them. I'd also like you to think about the idea of time as something of value, as time arguably could be one of the most valuable things, as you can't get time back. And then I'd also like you to think about the fact that you have to be 18 to legally gamble in the UK. The reason this age restriction is put in place is to safeguard our young people against potential harm, because young people are more likely to take part in risky behavior due to their brain not being fully developed at that young age. Okay, the prefrontal cortex hasn't been fully developed, therefore they're more likely to take part in risky behavior. So that's why that age restriction is put in place. So if we think about that definition of gambling, and then have a look at gambling-like mechanisms within gaming. So in a second, I'm going to show you this, a loot box or a mystery crate, a mystery box. I'm not sure if some of you have come across these before, but they are in many games online that our young people are playing. So FIFA packs, some of you might be familiar with FIFA packs, Llama Pinata, mystery weapon cases in CSGO. And they come in a variety of forms, shapes, and sizes. So they might be a crate, it could be a packet, and inside you have randomized objects, which all of these objects have different value. So you might have some high worth objects. So that could be a really good football player if it's a FIFA pack. And then you have some less desirable objects. So that might be a less well-known football player if we're talking about FIFA packs. Okay. How do you get these mystery boxes, crates, or packets? So there's two ways. You can either use real-world money to buy them within the game, and then, or you can spend a long time playing the game in order to win one. Okay, so that's when we go back to our idea of time, the concept of time as being something of value. Okay, so you're spending a lot of time to gain one of these mystery boxes, and then the outcome is based on chance, because you don't know if you're going to get something good or you're going to get something bad. These have been quite a hot topic recently, in the sense that there are certain people, certain countries that are deciding to consider these a form of gambling because the mechanism is very similar to gambling. And we're going to have a look at how that might be in just a second. So we're going to have a look at the idea of a loot box and put it into our definition of gambling and see what you think. So our definition of gambling here is to stake or risk money or anything of value on the outcome of something involving chance. Now, if we apply loot boxes to this definition, so here, players often spend real-world money to open loot boxes. So they're staking their money, or they could be staking their time if they don't have access to money. Because remember, you can win these loot boxes by playing for a long time. Okay. The items that you get in a loot box are random. So that's kind of going into our outcome being based on something involving chance. You might get something really good. You might get something not very good. Okay. So if you look at the definition there, I'll give you a couple of seconds and maybe you can start to have a bit of a reflection as to whether you think they should be considered a form of gambling or not. Currently in the UK, they are not considered a form of gambling. There were discussions around this recently, and the UK government decided not to consider them a form of, as you can't cash out real world money from opening a loot box. However, they have said that parents and children need to be cautious when playing games with loot boxes due to their similarities to gambling. Then you have other countries, Belgium, Japan, who've just banned them outright because they deem them too similar to gambling or a gateway activity to gambling. And then you have other countries like Australia, for example, who have decided to put age restrictions on games that include loot boxes. Again, because they see them as very similar to gambling and could potentially lead to harmful gambling behavior in the future. So it's just something to be aware of if yourself or any of the young people that you know are playing games with loot boxes, and the impact loot boxes have on how somebody feels, okay, and the chemical reactions in the brain also mimic that of gambling, okay. Okay, so signs to look out for should opening loot boxes become slightly more problematic. So if your young person is spending more and more time gaming, okay, locking themselves in their room, spending more time gaming, maybe they're spending more money on loot boxes. I know some parents know, some parents don't know that their card is sometimes linked up to the young person's gaming account, meaning that the young person can then easily spend money on the video game without the parent necessarily knowing, or it might go undetected for quite a long time. So that's something to check to see if your card is linked up to your child's or your young person's gaming account, okay? They might have access to their own money, but just to see if they are spending on your card, or to see if they are spending how much money they are spending on loot boxes, even if it is their own money. So withdrawing from social academic activities, so this is sort of spending more and more time gaming, more and more time opening these loot boxes. Mood swings, are they experiencing any changes in behavior? That could be linked with opening loot boxes. Are they becoming more secretive around opening loot boxes? And whose money are they using to access to access being able to buy these loot boxes? Okay, so that's going back to making sure that your card isn't necessarily linked up to the young person's video gaming account and things like that. So these are just some of the signs that you can look out for. I am going to, and these signs are very similar to the signs that you would look out for if somebody was struggling with gambling, okay? If somebody was developing an issue around gambling. So the signs that it's becoming more problematic are very similar. And the advice that we offer around loot boxes, which I'll come to in a second, is also very similar to the advice that we offer should somebody be experiencing harmful gambling. So I'm going to show you a video in just a second of a young person who talks about their own experience with loot boxes. He talks about his experience with FIFA packs and how very quickly he became addicted to opening FIFA packs and ended up spending large sums of money on these FIFA packs. So he just talks about his story. So I'm going to just stop sharing my screen in just a second.
Eventually, I was throwing £80 at a time onto the game 3 or 4 times into one night. And eventually, a few weeks before my exams, the moment came where the money just ran out. It's like an online trading card game where you pay to open packs which randomly contain players, and the best players will help you to win more games. I remember in 2012, I first asked my dad if I could buy packs, and my frustrations as he commented to me that it was gambling. The idea to me at the time just sounded crazy. I was doing it secretly. I'd be going into shops and buying vouchers, redeeming them and hiding them in my room so that my parents wouldn't know how much I was spending. When I was 17, I got my first debit card, and suddenly buying packs and spending money on the game was just instantaneous. It was a click of a couple of buttons away. Coming home from school where only a couple of my closest friends knew any level of what I was dealing with, the buzz of opening packs would give me a way to cope and to forget and just to feel in some way happy. And I felt like maybe my future self will understand because I need the money now to cope. Eventually, I was throwing £80 at a time onto the game 3 or 4 times into one night. And eventually, a few weeks before my exams, the moment came where the money just ran out. Money that had been given to me by my parents and my grandparents as savings for my future. It's so important to me that I stress I take responsibility for my actions. Those decisions were made by me and nobody else. They were decisions that were heartbreaking for my parents when they found out and read through the bank statements. I don't think I've ever been addicted to video games, but I was addicted to the buzz of chance every time that I spent money on those packs. I hope that in years to come, people will look back and just question how this was ever allowed to happen.
Okay, so that hopefully you're all able to hear that. And that is an example of a young person who as who developed an issue with loot boxes and very quickly became addicted to them. I think it's a really good example of how quickly it can escalate. And the more awareness we have around this topic, and the greater awareness we have around what is actually going on within our young people's video games, the more we can avoid such situations happening. Okay, so how to stay safe when playing games with loot boxes. So these are just some practical steps that we advise to young people or to anybody who is playing games with loot boxes to help safeguard themselves. So if you've got children of your own, perhaps this is something you can discuss with them or implement with them. So the first one would be a money limit. And so restricting the amount of money that you are able to spend on loot boxes within a certain amount of time. So that might be, for example, every month you can buy one loot box or one FIFA pack or whatever the loot box might be. The amount of time, so having a time limit on how long you're playing games. Sometimes, for example, if you wanted to play a game for a very long time in order to win a loot box, perhaps if you had a time limit and then took time away from the game, you might get distracted and then forget about the loot box. So it's important to take regular breaks when playing video games. And then if you are worried at all either about yourself or somebody else close to you regarding loot boxes, then you can always reach out to our support services. And there will always be somebody there to talk to you. Okay, so money, time, and talking. Now, our avenues of support. So as I said at the beginning, we run the National Gambling Helpline. That's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There will always be somebody there to speak to. We have a live chat at www.gamcare.org.uk. Our Young People's Service, so youngpeopleservice@gamcare.org. And then our Big Deal website, which is our youth-facing website, which will have all of our content that we discussed today, plus our avenues of support there as well. I think it's important to remember that no question is a silly question. Okay, so if you are worried about either yourself or a young person, then please do just use one of these avenues of support and ask a question. And there will always be someone there to support you. Thank you for listening today.
Thank you so much, Martha, and thank you so much. And that again covers a really important topic. I am conscious we are over time. I think if everyone's happy to stay, we can take maybe 10 minutes of questions. If people need to leave, please feel free to do that. But what I'm going to do is I am going to allow the questions to us as hosts. So bear with me 1 second. So if you look on your screen now, you will see that you are allowed to put questions in the chat and they will pop up for myself and our hosts here. So if you'd like to do that, we will then take any questions you have.
Maybe while we're waiting for questions, I can start with something that I always, when I speak to parents, I try to tell them that, because it is I'm a parent myself. I know what the theory says, I know what the evidence says, but I also know that the practice can be quite different, and we always have to keep up with technology. There's always something new coming up. We're now talking about generative AI, and we have a project on that as well. So parents sometimes feel intimidated by this, feel that they don't know it as much, that the kids kind of know their way around technology even better. So I want to reassure parents that children need your support, and it's the critical thinking skills that I think we kind of acknowledged in all the presentations in different ways. But it's something that parents as adults having more life experience can easily spot. While young people are still struggling because they are developing, and so on. So it's important for parents to have this confidence that it might look kind of like common sense to them, but it's still important to talk to their kids and teach them these critical skills that are kind of transferable skills. They're not only digital skills. And I'm sure that parents have, when they have a good conversation, have a way to have input.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely key points. I think we have a number of questions popping up. So I think Jan, you've asked, how do you spell Khanmigo? That's Khanmigo. If you come to the session on the 10th of March, I will actually demonstrate some of the AI tools for young people. So please do make a note of that. I think you have, Jill, you've asked a really good question. Can I ask if you see more young people with additional needs being harmed online or getting involved with gambling or pornography or bullying? I'll speak very briefly to this because we've just completed a project across Blaenau Gwent. And I think perhaps it's Katie's research as well that can speak to this. We know that some groups are more vulnerable online. And I think we also know, certainly when I was doing focus groups with the young people, that a lot of them had come to risky encounters and had sort of worked their way through them. But I think any young person can actually be vulnerable at some point in their life. So I think whilst we do need to give attention to young people with additional learning needs, young people perhaps leaving care or in care, I think it can't take away from the fact that any young person could potentially still be exploited. So thank you. Does anyone else want to take that question? Mariya, anything to add on that?
Yes, I mean, we keep seeing, even though we haven't done the analysis on the project that I was talking about, we keep seeing that young people who are more vulnerable offline are also more vulnerable online. It could be because they don't have the support they need, or it could be because they're facing extreme circumstances, and this kind of any troubles that they're having or lack of support kind of travels to the online world. So yes, we need to address all the vulnerabilities, and also the fact that children develop capacities throughout their life. So we need a scaffolding mechanism that helps them learn in a safe way, but also doesn't kind of prevent them from participating, expressing their voices, and taking the benefits of the digital environment as well. And just to say, I'm sorry, I can't see the questions. So if,
Okay.
maybe if there are more, we can read them out.
Yeah, sure. I'm going through them here, no problem. So I think we have Elspeth, you have a question. As parents to two boys aged 7 and 9, we struggle with knowing how much time to allow on online gaming each day. For example, they like to play Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, and watch YouTube. Any suggestions or rule of thumb that might be helpful to guide us? So I think I know that every family is different and it depends so much on your own context. But I think the key here is balance. And I don't think there's a golden rule as to how much time. And I think it's something that maybe pediatricians have looked at. I know that the Canadian Pediatric Society have actually created some screen time guides for parents, but particularly for younger age children, because there is a danger of a child being unattended with a screen for long periods and not doing other things and not developing vital skills, kinesthetic movement and just being able to have eye contact with the parents. If the parents are glued to their phone, that's not very good. But I think what you're asking is more practical. But I know Internet Matters have got age-related guidance on their website. And you might like to look that up. Katie, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just echoing, every family is different, and some children, it's really about sort of compression and can have really positive kind of outcomes for them as well. We do have guidance by age, and that includes our gaming guidance, so definitely go and check that out. We also have little bits of summaries around different games as well, and kind of suggested screen times. We also have some sort of in our article section, some conversation starters about how to manage your own screen time and feelings and things like that as well, which can be quite helpful to do with children and young people to get them thinking about the time that they're spending online and how to manage it themselves. And then we also have tips for parents, particularly with, sometimes it can lead to an argument or a difficult conversation managing, particularly on gaming, where children can become so invested and engrossed in that as well. So we've got lots of tips for how to, using Alexa or traffic light systems and things like that as well to manage time on those devices. So definitely go check out our gaming section. There's also advice by particular games and then also by age as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Katie. I think Carla has made another important point in the chat. I believe that the importance of education in relation to everything we've all spoken about, also the conversation around being kind and not behaving in ways that can make others feel negatively. Thank you so much, Carla. This is absolutely one of the key things we talk about, that we need values, and to ensure that our children practice those values, not just in physical life, but in their digital life, and understand the impact of consequences. Because I've been doing this work for over 20 years and bullying is still an issue, and it's a big issue. And so as parents, I think we've got to model, but also very simple things like help your child recognize they shouldn't simply, for example, post photos of their friends without asking consent, that they should be considerate, because sometimes they may see something nasty happening online. They could reach out to that person or get somebody to look at that and get help if needed. I think our values and kindness and care are even more important today than ever before. So I think, thank you so much for making that point. I think I'm going to take one final point here, and I think it's from Simon and Marianne. We have lots of questions, and thank you. But one of the important ones is, we're foster carers and have at present an asylum seeker from Afghanistan. He's 18 now, and since being with us 2 years plus, we have noticed from day one he's completely addicted to his phone, and especially to gaming. He calls it PUBG and has already spent over 300 plus on this game. He spends every day on his phone. We have put in place that he's not allowed to have his phone upstairs in his bedroom, not allowed to be on his phone at night. What else can we do or say? As all the debates we have with him, his answer is, this is what everyone does. So I'm going to invite Martha. Would you like to come in on that first?
Yeah, this is tricky because that's what they will all say. Because my background, I used to be a secondary school teacher, so that's my background. And a lot of the parents at Parents' Evening would often share your worries and say, oh, but they always say, but this is what my friends say. And often it's not quite like that. There will be some, every household is different. And some parents will have stricter sort of rules in place. Others will be more lax, and others will just be really struggling with it. I think going back to what Sangeet said, is it's about creating a balance. I think that's the most important thing. I know that can be tricky, but it's just making sure that he is also accessing other outlets as well, other than just his phone. Because it could be very likely that his other friends, yes, okay, they are playing PUBG, but they also have other outlets as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I think that's really valuable. It's a really important question. I think Martha's covered some really important points. I think the other thing to think about is the age of the young person, right? If he's an asylum seeker and he was 16 when he came into care, chances are his first language was not English. He's also connecting to maybe family and friends, and a lot of our research showed that young boys in particular use gaming for socializing. In other words, the component of being able to have a conversation with friends. Now, this is also true for, in general, children in care who've gone from placement to placement. One of the concerns often, 10 years, 15 years ago, I would get foster carers who wish they could turn off the internet. Thankfully, that's changed. But the issue is, if you take the young person's perspective, if they've only got their online interactions and experiences, and those accounts help them keep in touch with friends, that's a vital part of their well-being. I think what I say, and obviously I might get this wrong here because I don't know enough about the context, is always be curious with young people and invite them when you have a relationship with them about what they're seeing online. Get to know what they're doing so that you can then have the more tricky conversations about balance or about fake news or inappropriate content, anything else that worries you. Because I think sometimes we just, as adults, look at the phone and we think, oh, they're online all the time. And I think understanding what they're doing opens up a conversation. So I often have a 3 or 4 question workshop. The first question is, what do you think is the internet? The second question is, what do you love online? The third question is, what don't you like online? And I use this workshop to start with asking questions rather than telling. Because when I tell, I've shut the door to understanding their experience. So I think it's really key as educators, as parents, that we take that approach, and particularly if you're foster care in quite a tricky, difficult situation, having a young person from another country, it is to try and be curious, because if you have the relationship, then you can talk about other things. And I hope I'm making a bit of sense there, but those are a couple of key points. Mariya, did you want to?
I wanted to add very briefly, because I think the gaming issue is a concern for many parents. And it's actually a children's right to play, and it's very important for their development to be engaged in free play and be able to do that. And what we as adults see as just gaming is actually a very social activity where they learn and communicate, and they're being with others and they're being supported. But also they are learning while they're playing. We did a study where my colleagues were doing images of the brain, and they actually found that the gamers have better cognitive skills and better concentration. So what we see as a waste of time is not necessarily a moment when they're actually not learning. So having a conversation about what they enjoy online, and maybe expressing your kind of concerns of why this might be an excessive activity. It's more important to focus on whether it's having a negative effect, whether the child is sleeping less. Even though in a situation with a migrant child, they might be in a time zone where their friends are online. So it's important to have this conversation and consider the positives as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think such an important question, Simon and Marianne. So thank you, because I think your question opens the door to a lot of other similar experiences that I have with colleagues, that I've worked with over many years, foster carers.
So we're coming to the end of our session now.
I want to thank all my speakers here, Mariya, Martha, Katie, because I think you've all brought different dimensions to the topic and really valuable points, everything from children's rights to understanding impulsivity in games, and I think having an evidence base, which is what Mariya talked about at the start, because we should be led by what we know rather than what we fear. And I think we all have fears as parents. We want to safeguard our children, but one of the important things is that resilience doesn't come from children not encountering risk. Resilience comes when children encounter risks and know how to make decisions that ensures they don't come to harm. But in some cases, they may get it wrong. And then it's also important that they learn to recover from the mistakes, because all the top people in the world who achieve big things do not do it without making mistakes. So I think that's really key. Mariya, you wanted to come in?
No, sorry.
That's okay. So a huge thank you to all the speakers. I am going to just put up my final slide screen again to share with you all. All of you who've attended today, you're also going to get sent a link to a feedback form. And this link, when you complete it, will also provide you with access to a whole learning resource website that we've set up with links for you to go and explore around all the different topics, because as you I think appreciate, this has been a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and there's a lot more to learn about this. So this is the other link you need. So it is to the feedback form. So it's tiny.cc/Wise Kids Webinar 1. So thank you all so very much for making the time to attend today. Thank you to my speakers. It has been really valuable to have your time. I know we've overrun today, but I hope it's been useful to you all, and you are free to go.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.